Hello, today we'll be going over the CodeChef July Long Challenge Division 2 Problem 1, Chef and Strings. The problem statement is that Chef now wants to learn how to play a guitar. However, while playing a song, he has to skip several strings to reach the string he has to pluck. So for example, he may have to pluck the first string, then the sixth string. And Chef is playing on a guitar with 10 to the power 6 strings. So in order to simplify his task, Chef wants you to write a program that'll tell him the total number of strings he has to skip while playing his favorite song. So let's real quickly look at the example test case. So here he plucks string 1, then 6, then 11, then 6, then 10, then 11. So let's real quickly simulate this. So from picking the strings 1 to 6, we see that he will pluck string 1 and he will pluck string 6. So how many strings are in between 1 and 6? We can count this out. 1, 2, 3, 4. So he'll pluck 4 strings between plucking strings 1 and 6. Now he plucks from string 6 to 11 over here. How many strings will he pluck? So you know that he will pluck string 6 and 11. How many strings are in between? We can count this out again. We see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 strings in between. Now he plucks from string 11 to 6. So in this case, he plucks string 11 and he plucks string 6. How many strings are in between? We count 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 strings in between. Then he plucks from string 6 to 10. So in this case, he will pluck string 6 and 10. We count the amount in between. 1, 2, 3. 3 in between. Then at the end, he will pluck from string 10 to 11. Then he is done. So we pluck 10 and 11 and count the amount in between. In this case, there are 0 in between. So in total, he has plucked 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 3 plus 0, which is 15 strings. So now let's look at more closely how we can come up with these numbers more efficiently rather than going through and plucking each string individually. Well, we can use an example here. So in the first test case, we saw that with 1 and 6, when he was plucking from 1 and 6, he plucked 4 strings. And that was, he plucked the first string, then he plucked the sixth string, and then he counted the amount of strings in between. So the total amount of strings which he goes through is 6 minus 1 plus 1, which is 6 strings. Then the amount of strings which he skipped is this number, 6 minus 2, which is 4. So let me just go through what all of these numbers mean. So you know that from counting the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to n, there are n minus 1 plus 1, which is n numbers. This is the formula to count the amount of numbers. So for example, going from 3, 4, 5, all the way up to n, there are n minus 3 plus 1, which is n minus 2 numbers, because we exclude the number 1 and 2. So the same logic applies over here. We see that he goes through 6 minus 1 plus 1 strings, which is 6. However, if we look at the 2 strings which he plucked, in that set of 6 strings, we have to remove the first string and we have to remove the last string because he did not skip those strings. Instead, he just plucked them. So from the 6, we have to subtract 2 to get an answer of 4. And we can apply this to all the other test cases and see that this works similarly. So using this, we can actually apply this to the general formula. So here we have n minus 1 plus 1. So if you look at an example here where we have plucking from string A to B, we see that he plucks string A, he plucks string B, and then each string in between is skipped. So in this case, the total amount of strings he goes through is B minus A plus 1, using the formula we have over here. So now, because we have to account for this minus 2 over here, because we remember, we have to skip the string A because we pluck it, we do not skip it. And for string B, we pluck it and we do not skip it. So from here, we have to subtract 2. giving us b minus a minus 1 strings in between. So we can go through all the strings and just apply this simple formula to find how many strings he skips in between going through two strings. Now the code for this solution is very brief and simple. So here we have an integer t, and we're going to input into t. T is the amount of test cases. And then here we have a loop. So for each test case, we're going to have our integer n and input into n. Then we're going to create an array of size n and input into the array of size n. What this basically is the amount of strings he plucks. N is the amount of strings he plucks. And this array of n are basically just inputting the strings, the specific strings he plucked. So now we're going to have this long total. What this total is basically a counter for the total amount of strings he has skipped. So over here in this for loop, what we're going to do is we're going to add the absolute value between two pairs of strings. So for example, when going from string 6 to 1, what did we do? We took 6, subtracted it from 1, and then subtracted 1 at the end, giving us 4 strings. But here, however, when going from 1 to 6, it would end up being, if we take the element and subtract the next element afterwards, it would be 1 minus 6 minus 1, which would be negative 6. However, since we do not want a negative answer, remember, we always take the larger string, subtract it from the smaller string, then subtract 1 to make sure we do not get a negative answer, because we cannot have a negative amount of strings in between. So here, we take the absolute value of the difference between the strings, then we subtract 1. Then at the end, we are going to print out total.